Choice is one of the most important concepts that you can get. We're going to be talking about the laws of the universe. One of the laws is the law of polarity. There'd be no inside to the room you're in if there wasn't an outside. You couldn't have a right side to your body without a left, or a top without a bottom, or a front without a back. You can't have a bad without a good. See, the truth is we make it bad or good. Ralph Waldo Trine, In Tune with the Infinite, a great book, he said, nothing is good or bad except our thinking will make it so. Well, if everything's both good and bad, and we bring it together, what's right in the center? If everything here is bad, everything here is good, what's in the center? Just is. Everything just is. You choose whether you're going to look at the downside or the upside. Michael Beckwith gave me a marvelous concept. He said, it doesn't matter what happens in your life. Doesn't matter what happens. You can't control the circumstance, but you can certainly control how you deal with them. He said, when anything happens, step number one, it is what it is, accept it. It's either going to control you or you're going to control it. That's a choice. Step number two, harvest the good. Isn't that a neat word, harvest? Harvest the good. There's good and bad in everything, just harvest the good. Step number three, forgive all the rest. Forgive means let go of completely. It's a choice. Yet if you let go of the bad, the good seems to grow. You and I have a choice. It may be a difficult choice sometimes if you're dealing with a particular difficult individual or a particularly difficult circumstance. Nevertheless, we've got the power within us to do it. So as you go through the day, doesn't matter what anybody says, doesn't matter what happens, you have a choice to say, that's good. W. Clement Stone became the wealthiest man in the United States of America by 1970 because he always said, that's good. Doesn't matter what it was, he'd say, that's good. And then he'd look for the good. That's a good choice for you to make, and make it all day long. So your word for the day is choice, choice, choice. And only you have the ability to do that. And if you choose right, you are going to get results that stick.
Here's what I've learned about complaining. In order to complain, I have to have a reference point of something better that I want that I'm not willing to risk creating. Now let me explain that again. I have to have a reference point in my mind of something I want that's better than what I have that I'm not willing to risk creating, so what I do is complain about it instead. See, if I was complaining about my wife, it would mean that I would have to believe that somewhere out there in the world there's a better woman than my wife. See, if every woman on the planet died, except my wife, do you think I'd go to work the next day and complain about her? No, she's the only one. And I'd be going, hey, and I got her. This is really cool, right? Do you ever hear anyone complain about gravity? Very rarely. You know, gravity makes us all bend over. Do you ever see an old person walking down the street going, gravity? They have a little walker. I hate gravity. If it weren't for gravity, I wouldn't be all bent over like this. Gravity sucks. Now, have you ever heard an older person doing it? No, the reason they don't complain about gravity is because there's no alternative to it. You know, gravity just is. So if someone's complaining about something, it means they know there's something they can do about it, because we don't complain about the things we can't change. So as soon as you hear yourself complaining, I want you to stop and say, okay, what would I rather have? Remember, law of attraction always says focus on what you want, not what you don't want. Because when you're talking about what you don't want, when you're complaining and blaming, you're focusing on that which you don't want, and you're accelerating its expression out into the universe with those negative feelings. And yet we'll spend a majority of our time complaining about so many things. And usually we complain about them to people who can't do anything about it.
What's going to fulfill you is different than the other person next to you. You're not going to learn that from anybody else. And you got to find it, because success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And I get those phone calls all the time for the multi-billionaire entrepreneur or politician or business person, or a person just won their Academy Award and they're depressed and they can't tell anybody because they got all their goals, but they're not fulfilled because they really don't have that sense of meaning in their life. They went for something and they got it, they achieved. And if you doubt this, what I'm saying is relevant to you or us or anyone, just think about a month ago, we lost what I consider to be a national treasure, Robin Williams. How many of you loved Robin Williams? Look around the room, keep your hands up, look. And most of you didn't know him. Almost every, and then where you go in the world, people love Robin Williams. By the way, was he great at achievement? Oh my God, that guy, he said he wanted to become a great comedian. He did that. I want to make the world laugh. He did. I want to make my own TV show. He did it. I want to have the #1 TV show. He did it. I want to make movies. He did it. I want an Academy Award for not being funny. Not his skill set, drama, and he did it. I want a beautiful family, and he did it. And then he hung himself. Make everybody happy but yourself. Not a good plan. So if I had a gift to give you, it would be maybe make a different decision. And the decision is that no matter what happens in your life, you're going to live in a beautiful state. A beautiful state. And that could be happy, that could be grateful, that could be being generous. Those are all beautiful states, aren't they? It could be curious, it could be fun, it could be playful. You're not limited to one state, but it's different than suffering. And most people's suffering, and all suffering I've ever seen, I've traveled to 100 countries, I've dealt with presidents of countries and, presidents of businesses, CEOs, I've dealt with people in prison, I've dealt with, you name it, average people. Suffering always comes because you're obsessed about something related to you. You can only be depressed if you're focusing on yourself. You say, no, I'm depressed because it's my kids and they're not doing well. No, you're depressed because you feel you failed your kids. It's about you. It's about how you think what you should have done or shouldn't have done, or what someone did to you or didn't do to you in the past or the future, which don't even exist. So I have a simple goal. My goal is help people make a decision that says, I don't know what's going to happen. You might get a divorce, even though you don't think so. You might find a member of your family with cancer. You might have your house get burned down or have a tornado go by, and if you live in the same place, it happens every 2 years and you move back, we should talk, but some people seem to do that for some reason. You can't control those things. I can't control those things. I don't want those to happen to you or anybody I love or anybody who's even a stranger to me, but they're going to happen. True? Not positive thinking bullshit, just the truth. So if that's going to happen, I say make a decision now that says, I'm going to live in a beautiful state and I'm going to find beauty in whatever life brings me. Because life is too short not to.
And so you really have to believe the internet's going to be mainstream. A lot of people are going to get out there and use it, and that they're going to be willing to pay for some content.
Is that the operating idea that you have?
Well, each of these businesses is an entrepreneurial business. The overreaching theme is that, yes, I believe in the internet. I believe it'll get increasingly popular, and we're doing some neat new things to take advantage of that.
You've got a lot of cash on hand, yes?
Right.
All right. It puts you in an enviable position. You can experiment with a lot of entrepreneurial ideas and see what sticks and what flies.
Well, we're in business to make money,
But the other thing is providing such a cash flow for you.
Well, it all belongs to the shareholders.
Yeah.
We're not dilettantes.
No, I know.
We are business people, and it is true that if you find an idea that requires 3 or 4 years of improvement and patience and really sticking with it, that we're very good at that. Take Windows, which we bet our company on. Everybody doubted that would succeed. IBM did not support us in that. It took longer than we expected. Over 4 years before finally graphical interface got popular, and now people take it for granted. It's part of every personal computer, and you just expect it to be there. That was one of the grand successes of the company. In the same way, we're betting on the internet, that our tools there will be popular, and that a few of these content plays that we've decided to get involved in, that the scale and the users will make those into great businesses.
When something is considered quote unquote impossible, how do you reframe it so it becomes possible in your mind, and how much of that is mindset?
Well, I think impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion. When someone tells me it's impossible, I always just look at them. Anybody around me knows that they can't do that. So that's part of it. But if they didn't know me, it's your opinion. And they'll say, no, science shows. And I say, yeah, and how many times has science showed something's impossible? Now science shows it's possible. Things are impossible until somebody does it. And so I find that, most of your business people, you look at businesses and what does it take to make a business grow? It's not impossible to make a business grow. A business has been shrinking for a long time, or it's been stuck. The real problem is always, the chokehold is always the psychology and the skills of the leader. Always. And 80% of that is psychology and 20% is the mechanics. Like if you don't know how to read your financials and you're trying to fly the plane of your company, I mean, come on, if all you do is go down and you look at profit and loss and you see what it is and you have a beer, either way, you either celebrate or you get depressed, something, you're gonna be in trouble, right? But if you have the skill sets, that's one thing, but you can get any skill set if you have the psychology. And anytime a business is not growing, it is not because it's impossible. It's because they aren't innovating, and they're not innovating because they're believing it's impossible. I mean, if we all know what does it take to transform, and I always tell people it takes 3 things to create a breakthrough in anything, in your personal life, in your business, anywhere. You need a strategy. But that's not the first place you should look, and it's the first place all of us look. Me too. It's our inherent thing. You want to lose weight? Well, how do I do it? I want to grow my business? How do I do it? It's instinctive. We've been trained to think that way. But the problem is the how-to is usually not that complex. I mean, come on. 70% of America is 75% of America now is overweight. Is that because it's so complex how to be fit and strong, right? Only the 1% know the answers. They hide it from you. You have to work your ass off to not hear what it takes, right? And so I remember I went to a TED Med Center and I watched about 12 doctors, one after another, get up and do these stories about how we could just get patients to take their medications and try to figure out the whole thing. And I was just looking and going, you're all talking about strategy and you've forgotten psychology. Because strategy is wonderful. I'm a strategist. I spent my whole life figuring out strategies. As we both know, a strategy could save you a decade, right? In business, strategy could save you, it could make the difference between success and failure. But most people have strategies available, or they could get them, or you could create them. But the problem is you got a story. And your story is why it isn't working. And the story is, I've tried what? What? Everything. If you tried everything, you'd be fit, right? If you tried everything, you'd be profitable. If you tried everything, you'd be there. But people say it, I'm big boned. That's what I used to say. I'm still big boned, but I'm 38 pounds lighter than I was 25 years ago, and I've never gained it back, right? When I was big boned, that was my story. All the good ones are gone. That's why I'm not in a relationship. Or they're gay and I'm not, or I'm gay and they are, or whatever the story is. There's always a story. And what I tell people is, if you can just divorce the story of your limitation and marry the truth of your unlimited capacity, then the whole game changes.
You've lived a life dominated by doubt and fear. How do you step into bravery? Step. That's how you step into bravery. Step. Take the step. Step aggressively towards your fear. And that step towards your fear is the step into bravery. Because we're scared of what we don't know. And there is only one way to learn and to know, and that is to confront that fear. You have to step, you have to go. And this simple action, this simple attitude, it answers so many questions. My theory here would be, if you're afraid of fighting and altercations, go train jiu-jitsu. If you're afraid of heights, work on some rock climbing. If you're afraid of the water, it's time to swim. It's time to surf. It's time to get out there. If you're afraid of pull-ups, if you're afraid of pull-ups, do pull-ups. If you're in squats, do squats. If you're afraid of public speaking, go speak in public. Mm-hmm. If you're afraid to start a business, start a business. Make it small. And on all these, what you have to do is you have to mitigate the risk and you have to ease yourself into it, but you got to go for it. And eventually you will overcome that fear. Mm-hmm. But the hard part is you got to take that first step. Yeah. You got to take that first step to begin to inoculate yourself against the fear of the thing that's in your mind. Because that fear generally is in your mind. Yeah. That, when you get up on stage to do a public speaking, people are not going to throw tomatoes at you and say, "Oh my, you're an idiot, get off the stage." No, right. They're going to sit there, So there's nothing to fear. Yeah. It's in your head.
Make a damn schedule and stick to it. Okay, so what's the rule with the schedule? It's not a bloody prison. That's the first thing that people do wrong. They say, "Well, I don't like to follow a schedule." It's like, well, what kind of schedule are you setting up? Well, I have to do this, then I have to do this, then I have to do this, you know, and then I just go play video games, because who wants to do all these things that I have to do? It's like, wrong. Set the damn schedule up so that you have the day you want. That's the trick. It's like, okay, I've got tomorrow. If I was going to set it up so it was the best possible day I could have, practically speaking, what would it look like? Well, then you schedule that, and obviously there's a bit of responsibility that's going to go along with that, because if you have any sense, one of the things that you're going to insist upon is that at the end of the day, you're not in worse shape than you were than at the beginning of the day, right? Because that's a stupid day. If you have a bunch of those in a row, you just dig, you dig yourself a hole and then you bury yourself in it. It's like, sorry, that's just not a good strategy. It's a bad strategy. So maybe 20% of your day has to be responsibility and obligation, or maybe it's more than that, depending on how far behind you are. But even that, you can ask yourself, okay, well, I've got these responsibilities. I have to schedule the damn things in. What's the right ratio of responsibility to reward? And you can ask yourself that, just like you'd negotiate with someone who is working for you. It's like, okay, you got to work tomorrow. Okay, so I want you to work tomorrow. And you might say, okay, well, what are you going to do for me that makes it likely that I'll work for you? Well, you could ask yourself that, you know. So maybe you do an hour of responsibility and then you play a video game for 15 minutes. I don't know, whatever turns your crank, man. But, you know, you have to negotiate with yourself and not tyrannize yourself. Like you're negotiating with someone that you care for, that you would like to be productive and have a good life. And that's how you make the schedule. It's like, and then you look at the day and you think, well, if I had that day, that'd be good. Great. You know, and you're useless and horrible, so you'll probably only hit it with about 70% accuracy, but that beats the hell out of 0, right? And if you hit it even with 50% accuracy, another rule is, well, aim for 51% the next week, or 50.5% for God's sake, or because you're going to hit that position where things start to loop back positively and spiral you upward.
People don't know what success is all about. And since they don't know what it's about, they really don't know where to look for it. Success is really nothing more than the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. This means that any person who knows what he's doing and where he's going is a success. Any person with a goal toward which he's working is a successful person. This means that the boy in high school who's working toward a diploma, or the boy in college toward a degree, is just as successful as any human being on earth, because he knows what he's doing, why he's getting up in the morning, and where he's going. But conversely, if a person doesn't know what he's working toward, what it is he wants, doesn't have a goal toward which he's working, then he must, at least by this definition, be called unsuccessful. Why isn't then, with this simple definition, why isn't everyone successful? It should be easy. Yet surveys indicate that 19 out of 20, 95% at least, are not. In fact, a survey one time asked thousands of working men why they got up in the morning and went to work, and 19 out of 20 didn't know. 19 out of 20 working people didn't have the foggiest notion of why they got up in the morning and went to work. Under closer questioning, they said, well, everybody works. Well, that would be a good reason to quit. In fact, here's a little rule of thumb you might want to remember. Whatever the great majority is doing under any given circumstance, if you do exactly the opposite, you'll probably never make another mistake as long as you live. Just something to keep in the back of your mind. The problem with most people is that they're playing the world's most unrewarding game, and the name of the game is follow the follower. There's a story about a small town in which there was a jewelry store, and like all jewelry stores, or most jewelry stores at least, he had a big clock in his window. And every morning for years, he'd noticed a working man stop, adjust his pocket watch to the same time as the clock in the window. He'd been doing this for many years, and one morning the jeweler was out in front sweeping his sidewalk, and so he asked the man, he said, tell me, why do you adjust your watch to my big clock every morning? I've noticed you doing that for years. And the man said, well, I'm the foreman down at the big plant. He said, I want to make sure my watch is correct because I blow the quitting whistle every night at 5 o'clock. And the jeweler looked at him rather strangely for a minute, and he said, well, that's funny. He said, I've been setting that big clock in the window by that quitting whistle all these years. A very logical thing, but they could have been off 6 months. It was a case of a person just going along with what he thought to be correct without checking his references. So I want to suggest that From now on out, at least we do that. That we check our references and ask ourselves, are the people I'm following going where I want to go?
Next thing is that you've got to activate the thinker in you. Don't allow your emotions to control you. We are emotional, but you want to begin to discipline your emotion. If you don't discipline and contain your emotions, they will use you. Your mind goes on automatic, just like a garden. You know, I loved reading the book called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. He uses the analogy of the mind being like a garden. You know, weeds don't have to have any encouragement to grow. You don't have to water them. They don't have to get sunshine. They don't have to have fertile ground. They will grow through the cracks of a sidewalk. Am I right? But if you want to grow orchids or roses or any kind of exotic flowers, there are special processes and procedures you must go through. Well, by the same token, you don't have to force yourself or motivate yourself to think negatively, to be depressed, to hate somebody, to want revenge, to want to get back at somebody, to beat yourself up over the head, to feel loaded with guilt. You don't have to make any effort to do that. Your mind is on automatic. It will do that by itself. But if you want to begin to move into your own personal greatness, if you want to begin to really enjoy a happy, successful, healthy life, you've got to be willing to go against the tide. You've got to be willing to harness your will and say, in spite of this, I'm in control here. I'm not going to let this get me down. I'm not going to let this destroy me. I'm coming back, and I'll be stronger and better because of it. You have got to make a declaration that this is what you stand for. You're standing up for your dreams. You're standing up for peace of mind. You're standing up for health. You want it. And you're going to go all out to have it. It's not going to be easy. When you want to change, it's not easy. If it were in fact easy, everybody would do it. But if you're serious, you'll go all out.
Attitude has been called the most important word in any language in the world, because it's our attitude toward our world, toward all the people in it, that will determine the world's attitude and all the people's attitude toward us. It's a simple thing. Most of us know it, but we tend to forget it. People will react to us according to our attitude. And our attitude is the greatest gift we can be given. You know, the little creatures of the world were given a wonderful gift by Mother Nature called protective coloring, in which they can blend into their background without being seen. But man was not given this great gift, because man was given an incalculably greater one. Only man has the godlike power to make his surroundings change to fit him, because his environment will change as he changes. A man's environment is a merciless mirror of him as a human being. And if he thinks his environment can stand a little improvement, all he has to do is improve, and his environment will improve to reflect the changing man.
Another key in building this winning edge is, folks, you got to stand for something. People in America, the good people in America, are fed up with these dadgum fence sitters and mealy mouths. Corporate America has an especially black eye in business today. Most people in America think you can't find a company. They think you can't find a salesperson that'll tell you like it is and stand behind their word. They think these companies will sell anything, say anything, just to make a sale, just to make a profit. Well, you know what, folks, if you want to win in the free enterprise system in America today, you got to stand for something.
Set up some aims for yourself, goals that you actually value. And the Future Authoring Program helps people do that. And basically, it does a situational analysis of, it helps you do a situational analysis of your life more than a psychological analysis, I would say. And so the questions are something like, well, all right, you're going to have to put some effort into your life, and you need to be motivated to do that. And so what are the potential sources of motivation? Well, you could think about them in the big five manner. You know, if you're extroverted, you want friends. If you're agreeable, you want an intimate relationship. If you're disagreeable, you want to win competitions. If you're open, you want to engage in creative activity. If you're high neuroticism, you want security. Okay, so those are all sources of potential motivation that you could draw on, that you could tailor to your own, you know, your own personality. But then there are dimensions that you want to consider your life across. And so we ask people about, well, you know, if you could have your life the way you wanted it in 3 to 5 years, if you were taking care of yourself properly, you know, what would you want from your friendships? What would you want from your intimate relationship? How would you like to structure your family? What do you want for your career? Well, how are you going to use your time outside of your job? And how are you going to regulate your mental and physical health, and maybe also your drug and alcohol use, because that's a good place to auger down, you know, because alcoholism, for example, wipes out, you know, 5 to 10% of people. So you want to keep that under control. And then so maybe, you know, you develop a vision of what you would like your life to be, and that associates the goal. Well, once the goal is established, and then you break down the goal into micro processes that you can implement, the micro processes become rewarding in proportion, in relation to their causal association with the goal, and that tangles in your incentive reward system. You know, we talked about the dopaminergic incentive reward system, and that's the thing that keeps you moving forward. And the way it works is that it works better if it produces positive emotion when it can see you moving towards a valued goal. Okay, well, what's the implication of that? Better have a valued goal, because otherwise you can't get any positive motivation working out. And so the more valuable the goal, in principle, the more the micro processes associated with that goal start to take on a positive charge. And so what that means is, well, you get up in the morning and you're excited about the day, you're ready to go. And so as far as I can tell, what you do is you specify your long-term ideal. Maybe you also specify a place you want to stay the hell away from, so that you're terrified to fail as well as excited about succeeding, because that's also useful. You specify your goal. You do that in some sense as a unique individual. You want to specify goals that make you say, oh, if that could happen as a consequence of my efforts, it would clearly be worthwhile. Because the question always is, why do something? Because doing nothing is easy. You just sit there and you don't do anything. That's real easy. The question is, why would you ever do anything? And the answer to that has to be because you've determined by some means that it's worthwhile. And then the next question might be, well, where should you look for worthwhile things? And one would be, well, you could consult your own temperament. And the other would be, well, you kind of look at what it is that people accrue that's valuable across the lifespan. So you do a structural analysis of the subcomponents of human existence, and I already did that. You need a family, you need friends. Like, you don't need to have all these things, but you better have most of them. Family, friends, career, educational goals, plans for, you know, time outside of work, attention to your mental and physical health, etc. You know, that's what life is about. And if you don't have any of those things, well, then all you've got left is misery and suffering. So that's a bad deal for you. So once you set up that goal structure, let's say, and that's really in many ways that's what you should be doing at university. That's exactly what you should be doing, is trying to figure out who it is that you're trying to be, right? And you aim at that, and then you use everything you learn as a means of building that person that you want to be. And I really mean want to be. I don't mean should be, even those things are going to overlap. And it's important to distinguish between those, because that's partly, and this is back down to the micro routine analysis. So if I was saying, well, you're going to try to make yourself more industrious. Okay, number one, specify your damn goals, because how are you going to hit something if you don't know what it is? That isn't going to happen. And often people won't specify their goals too, because they don't like to specify conditions for failure. So if you keep yourself all vague and foggy, which is real easy, because that's just a matter of not doing as well, then you don't know when you fail. And people might say, well, I really don't want to know when I fail, because that's painful. So I'll keep myself blind about when I fail. That's fine, except you'll fail all the time then. You just won't know it until you've failed so badly that you're done. And that can easily happen by the time you're 40. So I would recommend that you don't let that happen. So that's willful blindness, right? You could have known, but you chose not to. Okay, so once you get your goal structure set up, you think, okay, if I could have this life, it looks like that might be worth living, despite the fact that it's going to be, you know, anxiety provoking and threatening, and there's going to be some suffering and loss involved in all of that. Obviously, the goal is to have a vision for your life such that, all things considered, that justifies your effort.
So what are the trade-offs that you would consider, like, you know, we work our asses off, we do a lot of stuff, but this is what we had to sacrifice in order to do it? If you think of it that way.
I think if you think of it as a sacrifice, then you're going to build frustration or resentment. I really don't. If you think it's a sacrifice, you shouldn't do it. I think the challenge is that most people have this illusion about life-work balance. And I think that's if you're going to accomplish anything, it's what people are laughing because it's bullshit, right? What's true is life-work integration. So I was just in 21 countries, or 7 countries, 21 days, but who's with me is my family, who's with me is my friends, and I've done well enough to have a plane and bedrooms and all that kind of cool stuff makes it, but when I didn't, we huffed it together, and in the beginning days it was coach and dragging ourselves around, but I thought it was great for my kids to have schooling, but I thought an education was more valuable, and traveling the earth was a part of that. But we're in the middle of this crazy schedule, but it's not work, it's a mission. When it's work, it's that. I always ask people, I said, how would you describe what you do? And people, I say, is it work, is it career, or is it mission? And most people, of course, say it's work, and that's exactly what it is. It's heavy. If it's your career, it gives you something more. If it's your mission, it doesn't wear you out, it brings energy to you, it's fulfilling. And if you can tie your mission in with the people that you love, it's pretty cool. There's some people in this room, they're my friends. I see Dean here in the front row here, and it's like we're all on this mission and we find time to connect and be with each other and have a blast with each other, but we're sharing about things that matter. I'm not a person to go to a party and go in the corner and chit chat. It's like, you want to talk about something deep? Let's rock. You don't? let me go home and be with my family, or, let me go do something fun, some of that nature. If you can combine your mission with your family, combine your mission with some of your friends, then you're going to accomplish 1,000,000 times more. But if you think it's a sacrifice, don't do it, because then all you're doing is you're going to have resentment later on or frustration later on, and then you really aren't contributing, because you're trading off, you're not giving.
You don't have to necessarily have done anything wrong for things to get completely out of control. It's a terrifying doctrine, but it's not a hopeless doctrine, because it still says that there's a way forward, there's a pathway forward, and the pathway forward is to adopt a mode of being that has some nobility, so that you can tolerate yourself and perhaps even have some respect for yourself as someone who's capable of standing up in the face of that terrible vulnerability and suffering, and that the pathway forward, as far as the existentialists are concerned, is certainly by the avoidance of deceit, particularly in language, but also by the adoption of responsibility for the conditions of existence and some attempt on your part to actually rectify them. And the thing that's so interesting about that is, two, as far as I'm concerned, and some of this is from clinical experience. If you take people, and I've told you this, and you expose them voluntarily to things that they are avoiding and are afraid of, that they know they need to overcome in order to meet their goals, their self-defined goals. If you can teach people to stand up in the face of the things they're afraid of, they get stronger. And you don't know what the upper limits to that are, because you might ask yourself, if for 10 years, if you didn't avoid doing what you knew you needed to do, by your own definitions, right, within the value structure that you've created, to the degree that you've done that, what would you be like? Well, there are remarkable people who come into the world from time to time, and there are people who do find out over decades-long periods what they could be like if they were who they were, if they spoke their being forward. And they get stronger and stronger and stronger, and we don't know the limits to that. We do not know the limits to that. And so you could say, well, in part, perhaps the reason that you're suffering unbearably can be left at your feet, because you're not everything you could be, and you know it. And of course, that's a terrible thing to admit, and it's a terrible thing to consider, but there's real promise in it, right? Because it means that perhaps there's another way that you could look at the world, and another way that you could act in the world. So what it would reflect back to you would be much better than what it reflects back to you now. My experience is with people that we're probably running at about 51% of our capacity. You can think about this yourselves. I often ask undergraduates how many hours a day you waste, or how many hours a week you waste. And the classic answer is something like 4 to 6 hours a day. Inefficient studying, watching things on YouTube that not only do you not want to watch, that you don't even care about, that make you feel horrible about watching after you're done. That's probably 4 hours right there. You think, well, that's 25 hours a week, it's 100 hours a month, that's 2.5 full work weeks, it's half a year of work weeks per year. And if your time is worth $20 an hour, which is a radical underestimate, it's probably more like 50 if you think about it in terms of deferred wages. If you're wasting 20 hours a week, you're wasting $50,000 a year. And you are doing that right now. And it's because you're young, wasting $50,000 a year is a way bigger catastrophe than it would be for me to waste it, because I'm not going to last nearly as long. And so if your life isn't everything it could be, you could ask yourself, well, what would happen if you just stopped wasting the opportunities that are in front of you? You'd be who knows how much more efficient. 10 times more efficient. 20 times more efficient. That's the Pareto distribution. You have no idea how efficient people get. It's off the charts. Well, and if we all got our act together collectively and stopped making things worse, because that's another thing people do all the time, not only do they not do what they should to make things better, they actively attempt to make things worse because they're spiteful or resentful or arrogant or deceitful or homicidal or genocidal or all of those things all bundled together in an absolutely pathological package. If people stopped really, really trying just to make things worse, we have no idea how much better they would get just because of that. So there's this weird dynamic that's part of the existential system of ideas between human vulnerability, social judgment, both of which are major causes of suffering, and the failure of individuals to adopt the responsibility that they know they should adopt. It isn't merely that your fate depends on whether or not you get your act together and to what degree you decide that you're going to live out your own genuine being. It isn't only your fate, it's the fate of everyone that you're networked with. And so, you think, well, there's 9 billion, 7 billion people in the world. We're going to peak at about 9 billion, by the way, and then it'll decline rapidly, but 7 billion people in the world, and who are you? You're just one little dust mote among that 7 billion, and so it really doesn't matter what you do or don't do, but that's simply not the case. It's the wrong model, because you're at the center of a network. You're a node in a network. Of course, that's even more true now that we have social media. You'll know 1,000 people, at least over the course of your life, and they'll know 1,000 people each, and that puts you one person away from 1 million, and 2 persons away from 1 billion. And so that's how you're connected, and the things you do, they're like dropping a stone in a pond. The ripples move outward, and they affect things in ways that you can't fully comprehend. And it means that the things that you do and that you don't do are far more important than you think. And so if you act that way, of course, the terror of realizing that is that it actually starts to matter what you do. And you might say, well, that's better than living a meaningless existence. It's better for it to matter. But I mean, if you really asked yourself, would you be so sure if you had the choice? I can live with no responsibility whatsoever. The price I pay is that nothing matters. Or I can reverse it and everything matters. But I have to take the responsibility that's associated with that. It's not so obvious to me that people would take the meaningful path. When you say, well, nihilists suffer dreadfully because there's no meaning in their life and they still suffer. Yeah, but the advantage is they have no responsibility. So that's the payoff, and I actually think that's the motivation. Say, well, I can't help being nihilistic. All my belief systems have collapsed. It's like, yeah, maybe. Maybe you've just allowed them to collapse because it's a hell of a lot easier than acting them out. And the price you pay is some meaningless suffering, but you can always whine about that and people will feel sorry for you, and you have the option of taking the pathway of the martyr, so that's a pretty good deal, all things considered, especially when the alternative is to bear your burden properly and to live forthrightly in the world. Well, what Solzhenitsyn figured out, and so many people in the 20th century, it's not just him, even though he's the best example, is that if you live a pathological life, you pathologize your society. And if enough people do that, then it's hell. Really, really. And you can read the Gulag Archipelago if you have the fortitude to do that, and you'll see exactly what hell is like. And then you can decide if that's a place you'd like to visit, or even more importantly, if it's a place you'd like to visit and take all your family and friends. Because that's what happened in the 20th century.